Welcome back to the Foundry by Forge College. So in our previous explainer, we spent some time designing network load simulations, right? Basically making absolutely sure our infrastructure doesn't just crumble to pieces when the masses arrive. But today we're pivoting to something a bit more personal, which is identity. Because let's face it, absolutely no one wants to memorize a string of 42 random alphanumeric characters just to send you funds or look up your decentralized profile. We want to trade in those unreadable crypto addresses for something sleek, something human. Something like xx So today, we're going to look at exactly how to interact with the Ethereum name service, or ENS, to actually perform a name registration and create that on-chain link between a name record and an account.
Okay, let's dive into this. Think of this as today's engineering schematic for building our identity machine. We'll start with the identity lifecycle, look at ownership versus resolvers, touch on scripting with AI, and wrap up with the verification checklist. Starting with Section 1. The identity lifecycle, acquiring the raw materials. Let's move to the actual mechanics and see how this builds step by step. Because before we can configure fancy pointers and decentralized websites, we have to secure the name itself. Step 1 of this pipeline is the availability check. You just ping an off-chain RPC node to see if your dream name is actually up for grabs. Doing this off-chain is huge because it saves you gas money. You're not paying to send a doomed transaction if the name is already taken. If it's free, we hit Step 2, which is the commitment phase. This uses a time-locked hash. Why? Well, because the blockchain is essentially a dark forest. If you just broadcast to the whole network, hey, I'm about to buy this incredibly cool name, front-running bots will instantly spot your transaction in the mempool, steal your brilliant idea, snatch the name before you, and then try to sell it back to you at a massive premium. So the commitment phase hides your intended name behind a hash to protect you. Finally, Step 3 is the actual registration. That's what gives you a transaction receipt and officially cements you as the owner in the registry.
Now, I need to briefly pause the pipeline for a second to define a core term that really makes all of this possible: name hash. You see, smart contracts literally do not read English. They don't care about capital letters, they don't process emojis, they strictly read fixed-length cryptographic hashes. So the name hash algorithm takes your beautifully crafted, human-readable label and mathematically compresses it into a standardized format that the registry contract can actually understand and efficiently store.
Moving right along to Section 2, ownership versus resolvers, the real estate analogy. And this brilliantly illustrates what is honestly the most critical conceptual hurdle in decentralized identity, separating the control of a name from its routing instructions. It's exactly like real estate. On one side, we have ownership. This is who actually holds the deed to the property. The owner has the ultimate authority, period. On the other side, we have the resolver. This is what the name actually points to. Think of the resolver as the sign you plant on your front lawn, or maybe like setting up mail forwarding. Because merely holding the deed to a house doesn't automatically tell the post office where to send your mail, right? You, as the owner, have to explicitly configure that sign on the lawn. So what can we actually write on that lawn sign? Well, here are the most common resolver pointers. First up is the addr record. This simply maps your name straight to a standard Ethereum account address. Super straightforward. Second, we've got text records. This is where you can store key value metadata. Think email addresses, a quick bio, maybe your social media handles. And third, the content hash. This one is incredibly powerful because it links your name directly to a decentralized content address resource, like a website hosted on IPFS. By configuring these specific records on your resolver, your identity mapping becomes truly useful to the outside world.
Onward to Section 3. Scripting with AI, vibe coding an Ethers.js script. Manually clicking through web interfaces is fine for beginners, but in engineering, we automate things. In fact, in the advanced learning programs at Forge College, we constantly see students using AI assistants to aggressively accelerate this exact scripting process. We call this workflow vibe coding. Now, what's really interesting about this mapping is when we take the plain English actions we ask an AI to code and connect them directly to the on-chain engineering artifacts they produce. It makes the whole process crystal clear. When you tell the AI to script an availability check, you are looking for an off-chain RPC response in your logs. When you ask it to script the registration, the tangible artifact you get back is the transaction receipt and the owner set status in the registry. And when you instruct it to set your records, you are generating resolver events. The AI might write the code for you, but you absolutely must know what artifacts prove that code actually worked.
Okay, time for a quick but absolutely crucial operational security warning. Please, I am literally begging you, do not ask a chatbot to write a raw deployment script and then immediately fire it off with your real funds on mainnet. That is a truly fantastic way to permanently lose your crypto. No way around it. Always, always test your AI-generated scripts on a testnet like Curly, or just spin up a local fork first. So here is what the proper iterative vibe coding loop actually looks like in practice. Step 1, you prompt the AI for a minimal baseline script. Step 2, run it safely on a testnet. Step 3, it will probably fail, and that's totally fine. Analyze the reverts and check the logs. Step 4, feed those specific errors right back to the AI and prompt it to add preconditions. Things like checking if you even have enough gas or if you're on the correct chain ID. You basically just iterate on this loop until you have a graceful, idempotent script, meaning a script that won't just completely crash if you accidentally run it twice. Which brings us to the final stage, Section 4, the verification checklist, quality assurance and auditing. So, the crucial point is that in Web3, we have to adopt a strict trust but verify mindset. Even if the AI swears the script ran perfectly, we do not believe it until we manually check the chain. We have to complete these 3 mandatory audit steps to actually prove our identity mapping works. Step 1, explicitly read the registration transaction receipt to ensure it didn't just silently fail in the background. Step 2, confirm your ownership on-chain by checking the registry contract for your specific name hash. And Step 3, perform a direct RPC query to the resolver to see if it actually returns your intended address. If all 3 of these pass, your identity mapping is structurally sound. To make this whole thing scalable, a great trick is to ask your AI to append a function that outputs this specific JSON verification report right at the very end of the script. It neatly logs the transaction hash, the block number, the owner address, the resolver address, and the final resolved address. This creates a permanent machine-readable transaction_demo artifact. Why do we want this? Because if your dApp integration inexplicably breaks a week from now, you can use this exact artifact for troubleshooting to see exactly what state the chain was in when you first configured it. But, all of this flawless engineering leads us to a slightly terrifying question. If a decentralized application is relying entirely on this precise mapping to authenticate who you are, what happens if an unauthorized user somehow manages to alter your resolver pointers? What if they just change the sign on the lawn to point to their house instead? Well, that provocative little security question is exactly what we're going to tackle in our next explainer on access controls and security features. But for today, your ENS identity mapping blueprint is officially complete. You've navigated the entire lifecycle, you've separated your ownership from resolvers, vibe-coded a deployment script, and verified all the artifacts. Seriously great work. If you want to dive deeper into these topics, absolutely check out the full courses and community resources available at Forge College to master the subject and explore plenty of other fascinating Web3 architecture. Until next time, keep verifying.